Okay, let's unpack this. We've got quite a stack of sources here today, really taking us into the heart of the AI gold rush.
Yeah, it feels like that, doesn't it? Hype, reality, and sometimes, yeah, outright deception happening.
It seems like everywhere you look, companies are just slapping AI powered on, well, everything, right?
Absolutely. And our mission for this deep dive is really to cut through all that noise for you. We're going to dig into a really dramatic recent collapse that shines a big spotlight on this whole issue.
We want to define exactly what this AI washing thing is.
Right. And maybe most importantly, give you some concrete tools, ways to maybe spot it yourself.
We've told insights from all over financial news, regulatory reports, some investigative journalism, even practical consumer guides. It's a wild landscape out there.
Definitely. So maybe we should jump right in.
Let's do it. Let's start with that story that really grabbed headlines recently. The sudden bankruptcy of a company that, not long ago, was valued at a staggering $1.5 billion. This was Builder.ai,
Yeah, Builder.ai. They had this incredible pitch, didn't they? Promising to make building apps as easy as ordering a pizza.
which is such a powerful idea, right? Making complex tech seem simple, accessible.
And that idea clearly clicked with some very serious investors. I mean, they pulled in major funding. You had SoftBank, Microsoft, the Qatar Investment Authority.
Big money, big names, big backing. You see those names attached and you think, okay, this must be the real deal, cutting edge stuff.
Exactly, legit. But then, boom, May 2025, bankruptcy. Just gone.
And the reason behind it is, well, it's pretty startling, isn't it?
It really is. The reports allege that the AI that was supposedly driving this Pizza Easy platform, it was largely just human developers.
People actually coding the apps manually in places like India and Ukraine.
Yeah, selling human labor, but marketing it as artificial intelligence.
There's a line from one of the reports, all humans, no intelligence. It just, wow, it sums it up, doesn't it?
Pretty damning, and it perfectly captures this core issue we're talking about today, which is AI washing.
Right. So we can explain that a bit more. It's like greenwashing.
Exactly like greenwashing, but for tech. It's basically when companies exaggerate or maybe even completely misrepresent their use of AI.
So they might have a tiny bit of automation they call AI, or maybe none at all.
Precisely. But they market it like it's core to their product. Why? To cash in on the hype, obviously. To attract investment. Look innovative.
They're selling the sizzle of AI without the actual stake underneath.
That's a good way to put it. And the Builder.ai case, well, it seems like a prime, maybe even extreme example of exactly this.
It really does. Let's go back to their story for a minute,
Yeah.
based on what our sources say. Founded back in 2016.
Built around that catchy pizza slogan, they had this platform called Builder Studio and even a digital assistant named Natasha. It all painted this picture of, automated simplicity.
And the money just poured in. What was it, $29.5 million in 2018?
Yeah, then it climbed to $195 million by 2022, and then the huge one, that $250 million round in May 2023, led by the Qatar Investment Authority. That pushed the valuation way over $1 billion.
And Microsoft came in that same year too, right? Not just investing, but a strategic partnership, integrating Builder.ai into their Azure cloud.
I mean, that's the kind of validation startups absolutely dream of. It gives them huge credibility.
It's the kind of validation that convinces other people to invest their money too. But apparently bubbling underneath all this was this reliance on human coders.
And it wasn't entirely secret, was it? There was a Wall Street Journal report back in 2019 that highlighted this very issue. That's where the all humans, no intelligence line came from.
So an early warning sign.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that, the train just kept rolling, kept gathering speed.
It did. But the allegations, they go beyond just misrepresenting the technology. The sources also mention alleged financial misconduct.
Yeah, this is where it gets really concerning. Reports suggest they were drastically overstating their revenue.
Like claiming $180 million in revenue for 2023 when the sources say it was actually closer to $45 million.
And then $220 million claimed for 2024 versus actuals around $55 million. We're talking a 300% difference. That's significant.
Hugely significant. And there's this specific allegation about something called a round-tripping scheme.
Okay, what's that?
Well, apparently it involved another company, Verse Innovation in India, between roughly 2021 and 2024. The allegation is that these two companies were basically invoicing each other for similar amounts of money.
For services that weren't actually provided.
That's the allegation. The purpose, supposedly, was just to artificially inflate those sales figures on paper, make the growth look much more explosive than it was.
Wow, that sounds incredibly complex and, yeah, deceptive if true. So what finally pulled the plug? What triggered the actual bankruptcy?
It seems to have come down to one of their senior investors, a group called Viola Credit. They had provided $50 million in debt financing.
Okay.
Then, in May 2025, Viola suddenly seized $37 million from Builder.ai's accounts. They cited breaches related to those overstated sales figures we just talked about. Basically, they felt the loan conditions had been violated because the company's reported financials weren't accurate.
And taking that much cash out.
It essentially emptied the coffers, left the company with very limited funds, unable to operate, and forced them into bankruptcy. There was even a new CEO who had just taken over, basically walking straight into this collapse.
What a situation. It's just such a dramatic fall for a company that seemed like it was on top of the AI world.
Absolutely. One source actually went as far as calling Builder.ai potentially the biggest AI fraud in startup history, drawing comparisons to Theranos.
Which is a very strong comparison. It really underscores the potential consequences, doesn't it?
Right.
When the reality of the technology just doesn't match the hype and the promises.
And that brings us right back to this broader issue of AI washing. As we've said, it's leveraging the AI excitement without the substance. But why is it so, well, pervasive right now?
Good question. Our sources seem to point towards a fundamental lack of what they call AI literacy among investors, the media, maybe even the general public.
Right. AI feels like this kind of magical black box to a lot of people.
Right.
So when a company throws around terms like AI-powered, it sounds impressive, futuristic, valuable, even if people don't really understand what it means.
There's a knowledge gap, basically.
Exactly. A knowledge gap that's pretty easily exploited by vague marketing terms. It's easier to sell the mystery of AI than the often complex, sometimes even mundane reality of building and deploying it properly.
And this isn't just harmless marketing fluff, is it? It has real negative impacts.
Definitely. For one, it just spreads misinformation. It kind of dilutes the public's understanding of what genuine AI can actually achieve. Makes it harder to tell the real innovation from the marketing spin.
And it introduces systemic risk, too.
Right.
Imagine industries like finance relying on systems marketed as super intelligent AI, but which are actually built on shaky tech, or, like in the Builder.ai case, manual processes.
That's a huge vulnerability. It could
Yeah.
have much wider repercussions if something goes wrong.
And for you, the listener, as a consumer or maybe a potential buyer, it just leads to disappointment. You waste your money, maybe your time, and it erodes trust overall.
Yeah, how can you believe the next company that claims their product is using AI to revolutionize something if you've already been burned by hype before?
It also creates this distorted market dynamic, doesn't it? Companies with slick marketing but maybe not much real tech can get an unfair advantage over the legitimate innovators who are actually doing the hard work.
Which is deeply unfair. And ironically, all that resulting skepticism, it can actually discourage people from adopting genuinely useful and innovative AI technologies down the line because they become wary of all AI claims.
So it becomes this damaging cycle.
Mm.
Hype leads to AI washing, which leads to disappointment, which leads to distrust, which then hinders real progress.
Precisely. So given these risks, what are the regulatory bodies starting to do about this? Are they stepping in?
They're definitely paying attention. We are seeing some early actions, particularly in the U.S. The SEC, for example, recently fined 2 investment advisors, I think it was around $400,000.
Yeah, Delphia and Global Predictions, for misrepresenting how they used AI in their investment strategies. So the SEC is showing they're willing to use existing securities laws to go after these kinds of false claims.
And it's not just the SEC. Other bodies are raising flags, too. You have groups like Hindenburg Research highlighting potential AI washing at companies, suggesting they might be overstating their AI capabilities while facing, fundamental infrastructure challenges.
And state attorneys general are also getting involved, warning about potential fraud using AI things like deepfakes or voice cloning and robocalls. They're indicating they'll use existing laws like consumer protection and anti-discrimination laws to tackle misuse.
But the question is, are those existing laws really enough? Some sources suggest there are pretty significant gaps, especially when the claims are more about exaggeration rather than outright provable fraud.
That seems to be the core challenge. How do you prove intent to deceive under existing consumer protection laws if a company just says, oh, our AI is still under development, we're getting there? It's a gray area.
And competition law might not be the right tool either, right?
Yeah.
Because the main issue here is deceiving consumers, not necessarily traditional anti-competitive behavior like monopolies.
Exactly. So looking ahead, what kind of regulatory approaches might actually work? Drawing lessons from places like the EU, which is developing its Comprehensive AI Act, our sources suggest a few possibilities.
Okay, like what?
Well, one idea is establishing much clearer definitions. What does AI-powered or AI solution actually mean? Maybe setting minimum technical criteria. If you want to use the label, you have to meet a certain standard.
That makes sense. What else?
Mandating more transparent disclosures. Companies would need to clearly explain how and where AI is genuinely being applied in their product or service, not just make a vague claim.
So, getting specific.
Getting specific. And implementing real penalties for misrepresentations, maybe similar to the rules around financial disclosures, to give these regulations some teeth.
There's also that tricky creed of verification, isn't there? How can regulators actually check if the AI is real without forcing companies to give away all their valuable trade secrets?
That's a tough one. Maybe developing specific data protection standards that allow for some partial sharing for regulatory checks while still protecting core intellectual property.
Possibly. Or maybe even some kind of registration or accreditation process,
Right.
where products labeled AI-powered have to go through some vetting to ensure there's substantive AI behind the label before they get a stamp of approval.
That's another potential avenue. Ultimately, though, it seems pretty clear that a coordinated approach is needed. Regulators, industry players, oversight bodies, they all need to work together to build trust and accountability in this space.
Absolutely. Now, we've focused a lot on AI washing as a reason companies might fail, often involving, alleged deception. But our sources also highlight something important. AI projects, just in general, have a really high failure rate, even when there's no bad intent.
That is such a critical point to remember. One source mentioned that over 80% of AI projects reportedly fail. That's apparently double the failure rate of typical non-AI IT projects. It's hard to get right.
So it's not always about deception. Sometimes it's just really difficult. Why? What are the common reasons?
Based on interviews with experts in the field, the sources identify about 5 common root causes for these failures, setting aside the washing aspect for a moment.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, simply misunderstanding or miscommunicating the actual business problem that the AI is supposed to solve. If you don't clearly define the goal, how can you build the right tool?
Right. Garbage in, garbage out applies to the problem definition, too.
Exactly. Second, lacking the necessary data. Either not enough data or not the right kind of data to train effective models. AI models are hungry for good data, and they're only as good as what they learn from.
Makes sense. Data is key. What's third?
Third is getting seduced by the technology itself, focusing on using the latest and greatest, shiniest new AI technique, rather than focusing relentlessly on whether that tech actually solves a real user problem effectively.
So tech for tech's sake, not for the user's sake.
Pretty much. Fourth is having inadequate infrastructure. You might build a great model, but if you don't have the systems in place for managing the data, deploying the model reliably, monitoring it, it won't work in the real world.
The plumbing matters.
The plumbing matters a lot. And fifth, sometimes it's about trying to apply AI to problems that are currently just too complex, too nuanced, maybe too subjective for the current state of the technology to handle reliably. Sometimes the ambition just outruns the capability.
You could almost see how some of those factors might have played into a situation like Builder.ai, couldn't you? Even before any alleged fraud. Maybe the tech truly wasn't capable of making app building as easy as ordering pizza.
It's certainly possible. Perhaps that difficulty led to the increasing reliance on human developers, which then maybe spiraled into misrepresentation. It really underlines the importance of realistic technical assessment and proper due diligence from the start.
And all of this drama, all this difficulty, it's playing out within this broader market context that, well, some people are starting to call an AI bubble.
Yeah, the hype has been absolutely intense for the last couple of years, hasn't it? And some indicators are popping up suggesting we might be seeing the beginning of a correction. Similar to past tech booms and busts like the dot-com era or maybe even blockchain hype.
What kind of indicators are we talking about?
Well, sources mention things like recent stock price drops for some major companies that are heavily invested in or associated with AI. Think NVIDIA, Meta, Intel. Also, studies showing maybe increasing consumer skepticism towards the term AI itself. People might be getting a bit tired of hearing it everywhere.
And I saw mentions of reports from large financial institutions starting to question the return on investment. All this massive spending on AI initiatives. Are companies actually seeing the benefits? One report apparently asked, too much spend, too little benefit.
Right. So this kind of market shift, if it continues, could mean less easy money flowing into AI startups. The venture capital might tighten up.
And the focus would likely shift, wouldn't it? From just claiming you have AI capabilities to actually demonstrating real technological progress and, maybe most importantly, real revenue generation.
Exactly. Prove it, don't just say it, which, in the long run is probably a healthy thing for genuine innovation. It helps separate the real signal from all the noise.
Absolutely. So, okay, given all this, the hype, the potential deception with AI washing, the inherent difficulty of AI projects, this shifting market context, how can you, our listener, navigate this space, whether you're a consumer, maybe an investor, just someone interacting with these AI-powered products or services? How do you spot the potential red flags?
That's the crucial takeaway, isn't it? And our sources offer some really practical, actionable tips, especially focused on things you might encounter online, like when you're shopping.
Okay, let's get practical. What's tip number one?
First off, look really closely at the images, especially for products. AI image generators are getting good, but they still make weird mistakes.
Like what kind of mistakes?
Look for visual inconsistencies. Is there an unnatural sort of plasticky sheen or weird blurring? Do parts of the object seem to fade out strangely? One source mentioned an example with crystal mugs that just looked off.
Okay, check the details.
Yeah, do lines that should be straight actually align? Does the image make practical sense? Like, is that cool, glowing lamp shown without any visible power cord or battery pack? Little things like that.
Good point. What else?
Check from multiple angles or pictures of the exact same product. Does the listing show the item consistently from different views? Or are they subtly different variations each time? AI can struggle with maintaining perfect consistency for a single object across multiple generated images.
Consistency is key.
It is. And tip number 3, read the listing thoroughly. Don't just get wowed by the pretty pictures.
Scammers rely on impulse buys, right? People not reading the fine print.
Exactly. Look for disclosures hidden away in the text. Do they use weasel words like crystal-like or mineral-inspired instead of just saying it is crystal? Do the written dimensions or materials maybe contradict what the image seems to show, like those flat ornaments that looked 3D in the picture?
Got it. Read everything.
Absolutely. Fourth, and this is a big one, don't just trust the seller's reviews or star rating. Actively seek out buyer photos and reviews.
See what actual customers received.
Precisely. Do the photos posted by other customers actually match the slick listing images? Does the background in those buyer photos look like a real person's home? Use reverse image search on the product photos from the listing itself.
Why do a reverse image search?
Well, you might find the same image used on other sites with terrible reviews, or you might discover it's just a generic stock photo or even shows up on an AI image generation website gallery. That's a huge red flag.
Okay, great tip. What else?
Think about the price. The old adage, is it too good to be true? Compare the price to similar products that you know are legitimate. If something is drastically cheaper than all the competition, be suspicious.
Like those super cheap stained glass lamps that turned out to be just printed plastic.
Exactly that kind of thing. A price that seems impossibly low often is.
And finally,
Finally, do a quick bit of research on the seller or the person making the claim, if possible. Is it a well-known, reputable brand? Or is it some brand new, unknown seller with zero history? Do they even have a proper website?
check their credentials, basically.
Yeah. And if it's, say, an author claiming AI expertise for a book, does that author seem like a real person with a credible background? You can even try a reverse image search on profile pictures. Sometimes, believe it or not, sometimes even seller profiles use AI-generated faces.
Wow. Okay, so doing just a little bit of digging, applying some healthy skepticism, it can really save you some trouble.
It absolutely can. A few minutes of checking can save you money and disappointment in this world of, well, pervasive AI hype.
So let's try and bring this deep dive together. We started with that really dramatic story of Builder.ai's collapse, using it as a stark example of the potential consequences of AI washing, exaggerating capabilities for financial gain.
Then we explored the broader phenomenon of AI washing itself, trying to understand why it's become so common, partly due to that AI literacy gap and the negative impacts it has on trust, on market fairness, and even on hindering genuine innovation.
We looked at how regulators are starting to wake up and respond, using the tools they already have, but also acknowledging the challenges and discussing potential future approaches, things like clearer definitions, transparency, maybe accreditation to bring more accountability.
And we also step back to recognize that AI projects are just inherently difficult. They often fail even without intentional deception due to things like poor problem definition, data issues, or inadequate infrastructure. It's not always fraud. Sometimes it's just hard.
Right. And we placed all of this within the context of a potential AI market bubble, where increasing scrutiny might mean the era of easy money based purely on hype is ending, forcing companies to show real substance, real results.
And crucially, we wanted to equip you, the listener, with those practical tools. How to scrutinize images, read descriptions carefully, find real buyer feedback, check prices, and research the source, all to help you spot potential AI washing and scams in your own interactions.
Because being informed about these issues, understanding the nuances, it really helps you make better decisions. Whether you're thinking about an investment, buying a product online, or even just trying to make sense of the technology that's rapidly shaping our world.
It's about cutting through that noise, isn't it? So you can focus on what's real, what's substantive, and what actually matters.
Which leaves us, perhaps, with this final thought to chew on.
Yeah.
Given how increasingly convincing AI-generated content can be, and how sophisticated misleading claims are becoming, how much of what we encounter online and in the marketplace about AI can we truly trust anymore? And whose responsibility is it ultimately, the company selling the product, the platform hosting it, the regulator, or you, to verify the reality behind the hype?